Okay. Good morning. It's 10:49 a.m. on the 20th of February 2021. And this is a hopefully brief discussion of the upcoming month plus, starting on the 24th of February and running through into the 25th. I went through all of the data that could be isolated out of the old sets around this particular point, and we're looking basically at something that's very large, transforming, fundamentally affecting, in other words, to that effect. So it's going to be part of the destruction of the past, probably the collapse of some supporting aspects of our institutions, such as banks, etc. So all of the old language really does go to the idea of the silver squeeze affecting the banking infrastructure at a very profound, serious, significant, and fundamental level. And it is transformative, and it is part of the destruction of the past and leads us into this the transformation into whatever we're going to make for the future. There's a decent amount of language about completion, about putting to rest, that is to say, getting closure on aspects of the transformation and the destruction of the past. There's indications that there's not going to be a whole lot of language spent on, at this time anyway, on digesting the past, so to speak, where we argue about what has occurred and put our opinions and interpretations on what has occurred. Rather, the language seems to suggest that once we get into this transformative period, the impetus and the interest and the direction that we're facing is to the future, and that we'll be reacting on a daily basis to the demands of that day, but always thinking about what's going to be coming and hitting us next. Now, this is titled Space Woo. Damn it, I didn't have one of those charts here. Anyway, there's an old chart I've got on my Twitter timeline there that shows, it's an old Bitcoin chart, and it shows some of the elements of what we're going to be dealing with this year. It showed that we were going to have a deadly winter and this kind of thing. But what I wanted to focus on today was the upcoming space woes, because our space industry is going to be hit by, according to the data sets, by some conditions that won't be favorable to continuing business as usual. And these conditions are likely going to result in several satellites that are up there now crashing into each other or crashing into something or being crashed into in such a manner that the debris field becomes a real hazard, and that for some period of time, the data would suggest probably around 2 years, it's going to be very hazardous to try and do launches, because there will be things going on that you're going to run into up there at a very high rate of speed. And so that was a big temporal marker, this encapsulation of Earth by space debris. It's not permanent. It's not a terribly exciting thing, but it'll have some aspects of it that are indeed exciting as we get into the actual event, whatever it is, whether it's, small meteors, meteorites, asteroids, satellites gone awry, whatever the proximate cause is. The data sets describe it in a very colorful fashion as some of the low-level debris becomes visible here on Earth. So it's an interesting time for us coming up. This is directly connected to and is a part of the overall temporal markers within the sets for the giant secrets revealed, which goes to the reverse engineering of space UFOs and this kind of thing, which we now have. The military has responded affirmatively to a Freedom of Information Act request saying that, yeah, here's 154 pages of documents, most of which we've ripped the guts out of so you can't read anything, but here are a few tidbits that say, yes, we have shit, and we've looked at this shit, and here's some of the results of some of the tests on this shit. And we don't know where this shit comes from, but it ain't from us. And that's really about as far as it goes, but of course that speaks volumes to the 74 years of secrecy and all the people's lives that were destroyed by that secrecy and so on. Now we have to get over that. We have to get to the point here real quick where we dropped the idea that life is fair, we shouldn't have suffering, everything should go our way, okay? All of that's like progressive think. What is the term? Entitled. It's entitled thinking. All right. Life is suffering. No one's guaranteed anything, and then you die. So that's reality. Now, in that reality, we get a few tidbits here and there. But I think, it's my opinion, that as we get these tidbits about the UFOs, we have to let the recriminations go. We have to let go any idea that justice or fairness would be served by seeking retribution against people that did nasty things under extraordinary circumstances for the extraordinary reasons associated with UFOs and space aliens and all of that, okay? So under those circumstances, you are not talking about civilized behavior. You're talking about defense of the civilization, defense of the species behavior, for which, regrettably, we must extend a range of forgiveness for mistakes. There can't be hauling people forward now for shit they did 50 years ago kind of thing, right? Under those circumstances, because we'll never know. We'll never know how terrified, how freaked out, and so on. We're going to find out our own terrors and freaked out aspect of this. But so my thinking is, in order to get ahead, we got to get over. And whether it means closing it off, walling it off, ignoring it, denying it, or whatever, we need to not focus on the past, not focus on the bullshit, the lies, the tainting, the damage to ourselves and our civilization, but we need to accept that damage, own it, and get beyond it any way we can, because we don't have the luxury of time to do it in a touchy-feely kind of fashion, trying to heal our hurt feelings, right? We just have to eat them and say, okay, that's it, you know. Whether you encapsulate them, you know, and keep that and hold a grudge, that's fine. Whatever it is, just don't bring it up. We've got other shit to do. So now we're going to get into this period here. We are into this period where we've got the first signs of the Ice Age. Ice Ages are not what you think. You know, they don't creep and take 10,000 years to get everything frozen. It happens very rapidly. It can happen very rapidly, especially under conditions that we have now with a solar minimum and a waning magnetosphere, which usually protects us from these extra radiations. We don't have that now, so we can probably go very rapidly into Ice Age conditions. Very rapidly might be 2 years, it might be 20 years. We don't know because we've not lived through it. But we do know that there have been periods in the past where vast areas of glaciation have appeared in relatively short, and we're talking like 2 years, periods. Now this requires an interesting set of things, such as a pretty much continuous source of precipitation and a particular kind of evaporation at the edges of it. And so we can spot where the glaciers are going to form as we watch rain patterns emerge over these next few months, right? Because what we're seeing now is this transformational process in Earth, or in the ecosphere, of our jet streams, which are the predominant weather driver absent the ocean. They're our most visible weather pattern indicator are the jet streams. And they're going to be starting to bring precipitation to areas that may not have had it for a while, or may have never have had it in the kinds of quantities that they're going to be seeing. In many of these areas, it might form inland seas. So here is a hypothesis, right? Here is a description, and I'll just put a place on it so that we all can look at what could possibly happen there. But I'm not saying it would happen there. We don't know where it's going to happen. Unfortunately, I think that there will be at least one instance of new glaciation forming in North America. As an instance, let me go back and say there was some thinking that the giant Laurentian ice sheet that covered 2/3 of North America at that one point formed in its core literally over the course of about 6 weeks, and that had massive growth in a particular winter where it was just constant storm for 6 weeks of solid rain in freezing conditions. And from that, the glacier proceeded. So it can happen very rapidly and become very large under these kinds of conditions, especially that we have now. All right, so here's the description of something that could happen. If we had this cold shift ever so slightly over to the southwest, over to the west, and take the point off of Texas, you may have a situation where incoming jet streams bring rain from the Pacific Northwest, and we've had vast quantities recently, huge amounts of rain that's bringing down trees along with giant windstorms. So, big windstorms for us. So if this were to occur, you might have a situation where you get a lot of rain in, say, the southwest. Now, in the higher elevations up there, that might come in as snow. So you may have a situation of a big inland sea forming around basically an island that would become the center of the glacier as that snow compacted and turned into glacial ice. I'm not saying it's going to happen in the southwest. There's indications that those badlands were formed in that manner, and through the resulting degradation of the glaciers and movement and stuff. But it's in my opinion that the planet changes so much from age to age that predicting that a glacier is going to form where one had formed in the past is really not particularly smart, in the sense that they're not likely to form in exactly those same places. For instance, the glaciers in northern Italy and Switzerland, the ones in which the Iceman was captured, as well as the glaciers in Chile, what they call Chile and Peru, what the natives call the veins of Apu, that feeds all their water system. Those glaciers are recent. They're not old glaciers. And so they were formed in the last minimum, 400, 600 years ago. And they weren't particularly extensive. They stopped growing and were just stayed around and took this long, took 400 plus years to melt. The glaciers we're going to be forming now in our ice age are likely to take a lot longer to melt, because I bet you we're going to get into a pretty serious ice age, much more serious than I had originally anticipated. It'll last many years as in its overall effect, but we will be able to predict probably by 2041 the edge of it. So if we get into the particular kind of solar changes in 2041 that could not be seen or forecast now, then we would be able to say at that stage, aha, this is one of these regular every 425 year minimums, and this will, 2041 would at that point then mark its more or less peak for the cold effects and changes that way. They would stay there for perhaps as much as 60 years and then wane. And we would be back into a kind of temperature that we would have seen here in North America in the 1920s and 30s. Now, so the space woo is connected to all of this because the problems we're going to have with the space industries that are going to arise very shortly, and may even occur in March of this year. There was some indications that we would have spring issues. That there would be like a spring space storm, so to speak. And anyway, and so those problems that we're going to get in the form of debris, this debris layer over us, are going to participate in our ability and inabilities relative to space forecast and so on. Because also, not only does the debris cause launching into orbit issues, it also causes issues getting information back through it from satellites and other things already up there. So you can see this is also going to affect the International Space Station very noticeably, that if anybody had to come back, taking a real chance trying to go through the debris field. You'd have to really plot it. And with bazillions of pieces of crap flying around at 30,000 miles an hour that can punch a hole through your brain and your spaceship before you can blink your eye, you know, it's a little dodgy. It's like serious Russian roulette. Anyway, so that's our space woo, is that we're going to have these climate effects. The climate effects are going to potentially come in very rapidly, are coming in very rapidly. We're feeling the first of them now. We need to react now. I do not agree with John Kerry in any way. There's no possible way we can avert or change or alter the climate itself. Even if we burned every fucking thing we could possibly get our hands on in the planet, we cannot warm it up enough to overcome the cooling effects that we're going to be going through. We can respond effectively, creating new forms of energy that will work without causing us pollution issues, that will reduce the need for expenditure of energy to acquire the energy, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm talking about the magnetic motors and other things that we will engineer very rapidly. So we do need to have a Manhattan-style project going on right now in order to save as much of humanity as we possibly may, by providing, you know, reliable distributed energy. So as I was saying in the tweet today, Elon Musk bitched about the power grid in Texas, but he could very easily turn over, you know, put his industrial engineering magic to work and have even just a small factory producing magnetic motors that, even if they were only 20% efficient and generated electricity for a lifespan of only 5 years with a low cost of production, they would be fantastically worth it. And you just plop them all over, plug, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 of them into a bus bar and plug your house into that. Then there's no longer an issue of the grid. You've got a distributed system. Then also that system, that kind of a system, he's stupid not to have done it, by the way, because of this final point, that kind of a system allows for electric vehicles to be useful everywhere under all conditions for all times. You know, you can't get hit with a $900 charging bill just because the grid goes down if you're running a bunch of these little devices just sitting there working off of neodymium magnets and cranking out juice, even if it is a low level of efficiency. So under the circumstances, like I say, Elon should have done that right off. Then the power wall, which you could just feed the power into his power wall and distribute it to the grid for the big industrial users and charge them. And it upends our system. It makes everybody's house become a producer. All of their excess electricity could be dumped onto the grid, and we could electrify our industry and build back industry super cheap. It would also make for fantastically cheap Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency mining. So with reliable, it's basically an uninterruptible power supply right there next to your PC, just cranking right away. So these kind of things are doable. Industrial might helps. The ability to have factories and people and do things at that level really does help once we decide to do these things. And that decision point is on us. Maybe because of the words and language I'm getting, maybe it's March, right? maybe what starts on the 24th, which is this what shall I call it? Crying and complaining session that starts on the 24th. Maybe that boosts us towards this this point where we'll get a commitment and put the money to excuse me, to making sense. It's very cold here, and I didn't turn the heat on. Anyway, to making sense of the and approaching sensibly some of the challenges we have with our environment and our stupid politics and the screwed up Dominion voting machines and all of that kind of stuff. So, leaving aside all of that at the moment, and just to get this done and move on to another subject at another time, we have a bunch of space woo to deal with. And in sailing terms, when you get out in a boat, you're doing blue water sailing, which means you can't see land, and you can't see land for days, and the water is truly blue. Well, if the clouds aren't over you, and you get a low pressure system, what they call depressions, but it's really just a low pressure system. They swirl around you and they cause problems. We call them storms here, right? And so you have to have heavy weather tactics. So depending on the type of boat, you may need to set a sea anchor, and that can be as cheap as an old tire on a bunch of chain and a big swivel and an old shrimp net off of the back of it with the end of the shrimp net cut off so that it restricts and constrains the water flow through it, but doesn't stop it. But you have to know when to deploy these kind of things, right? It doesn't do any good to put it out too early. It can affect your rate of speed relative to the storm. Maybe you can sail out of it. So under the circumstances, timing is very key. And that's really why I'm making these videos now and trying to keep up a consistent schedule of one a week and maybe one interview every week to talk about what's going on, is because we're in this very large period or period of time that will run through the end of this year. Its peak range is from the 24th of March all the way through to the end of November, but it runs through this year, and it extends out into 2022. And I think we'll actually get some relief on the space woo, on the space debris or whatever causes our problems. I think that will occur sometime in 2022. We'll have, according to the data, we'll have a couple of failed experiments, and then one will work surprisingly well, and then we'll set about getting it done. So it's not like a forever kind of thing. It just requires us to basically clean up after ourselves. But as part of all of this, woo stuff, in the heavy tactics, you got to have heavy tactics for the woo, right? Because we're coming into a global depression, a global low pressure system relative to money. There's going to be a lot of people that won't be bribed anymore because the money won't be flowing. And it takes constant money flow to maintain these deep underground industrial complexes and think tanks and space alien re-engineering places and all of that. I mean, that's big money, and the money has to have purchasing power. So if they're going to run up into a situation where, they may need silver, right? And so they're going to run up into hyperinflation in the silver. They're going to run up into hyperinflation in all of their material. The problem is government cannot respond to hyperinflation. They can create it, and they can create it extremely rapidly. But the way that government contracts work, the way that purchasing and payments and all of that kind of stuff work, they're bound to old schedules, bound to old lists of prices. And so it takes them a long time to react to rapidly changing conditions on the ground. So I'm expecting that what will happen is that the economic problems, this crying and complaining that will begin on the 24th, will lead to some form of hyperinflation unity, if you will, where all the central banks agree to hyperinflate at the same rate or some weird thing, right? But there will be some kind of resolution for that that will not be good for the government procuring processes, or any government procuring processes in the West, very rapidly. So maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. And we'll start having real problems with government where the price of goods has outstripped their ability to effectively pay. So what actually happens, because I worked for government, I've worked on payment systems and stuff. And so what actually will happen is that some outfit will submit a bill and on a contract for, bolts or milk for school or milk for a prison or something, right? It'll be a more rapidly used commodity than bolts, unless we were talking a construction project somewhere. But nonetheless, they'll get a bill for a commodity that they will not be able to pay because the actual bill will be fantastically huge, because that'll be the price on the ground. So say that milk went from its current price and we saw milk at $8 a gallon, right? Just that minor rise. I mean, that's a huge damn rise, but relative to things that could happen, it's minor. But say that the government, maybe they had a contract because they were buying the milk in bulk and they were only going to pay 88 cents a gallon because they get it in a big truck and it's delivered to the prison in a big truck and it's not individual. It doesn't really happen that way. The prisoners get the individual little milk carton things, but there's government discounts on a lot of this. And so if they get a bill like that, all of a sudden they can't pay it. And then it's up to the vendor to decide if they're going to keep delivering. Probably they will not, because that's the usual reaction, in which case the prison doesn't have milk anymore. And so the prisoners riot and all hell breaks loose. But that's only the minor side effect of it, because they still won't have milk when the riot's over. And they still won't be able to pay for the milk, because by the time that they've gotten adjusted to the $8 price, it'll be 16. By the time they do 16, it'll be 58. It'll just go that kind of fast. And so they run into this real issue on everything. And it'll also especially affect those people that are being paid $10,000 a month to keep quiet. And it's their, quote, bonus for their work in Area 51 for basically keeping quiet about all the stuff they see, right? And pretty soon they'll be paid that $10,000 bonus, but it won't buy as much milk as it used to. And so they're going to be thinking, I got to do something about this. And it won't take too many more months based on what we saw in the Soviet Union. So if we were looking at a political breakup of the United States in a similar fashion as had happened in the Soviet Union, for similar reasons at an economic level, not political, because we've been infiltrated by the CCP and they've had this long march through our institutions and corrupted our education system and destroyed the education of a couple of generations. And they've been doing things to emasculate men since the 1920s here. Long list of conspiracies, but so we're not quite the same as the Soviet Union, right? But if we were to say that collapse bears certain similarities, we would say that it would take only 3 months, not 1 or 2, but 3 months, and we will have scientist types who had been, and other people who had been bribed, not being bribed anymore, even if the money is nominally placed in their bank account. And so in those period of times, in only 3 months, you start getting the breakdown where you see that there's scientists trying to sell secrets or information, just to make money to buy their kids' milk. And so that kind of stuff is in our future. So that's what we're going through from March here. So the 24th of February. But the majority of this effect will be seen in March, and that will sort of start our counter to these other effects that will roll out in the future, because the effects of this crying and complaining wouldn't be a party, session or whatever that occurs on the 24th, with lots of people weeping and wailing and much gnashing of teeth and emotions and histrionics and that kind of stuff. The process of it really is going to hit us through March, and it keeps going and going. And this runs out to the end of November at a pretty steady level of emotional tension. So we'll just put it down here as December 1. Okay. And commensurate with this, there's going to be people that will have emotional releases. But they have big building tension now. Lots of people have building tension on the cryptos, right? A lot of people are running through this FOMO, fear of missing out, on the cryptos, and so they've got building tension that way. Other people that own cryptos are, oh my God, look at it go up, you know, and which is good relative to the price of milk, that kind of thing. So you'll be able to buy milk for your family, and so they feel they have a building emotional tension on that, but theirs is a positive as opposed to the negative of the FOMO. And we'll also have release tension throughout this period of time. It's not all building, of course, you can't have that. But the release tension will also be episodes of people having good release from, you know, Bitcoin going to, you know, 64,000 or whatever, right? And then they decide to sell off and buy stuff. That was actually in the data sets, was that there was going to be a period of time around $64,000 for the Bitcoin, where Bitcoin holders would deliberately choose at that moment to move a Bitcoin into fiat, take the fiat and buy other stuff in order to stimulate the economy or whatever their motivations were, you know, buy that Tesla or whatever. We're in this period right now. This is a great period of time. In this period of time, we have big secrets revealed. In this period of time, we have the potential release, officialdom release of UFO information in summer, but also the forecast release of UFO information that goes back to like 2014 or earlier, that was forecast in this big wave of secrets revealed. We have emotional turmoil, we have political turmoil, all of that kind of stuff. I personally don't think the USA is breaking up. I could be wrong, but I don't see the indications relative to the population and the language popping up. That can change, language changes. If it does, I would certainly note that as we go forward. But it does not look that way. There's a lot of language that was forecast way back when about this period of time, about the temporal markers, following the temporal markers that we've been seeing appearing. And as the silver temporal marker appears, that's like a super major one that goes all the way back to year 2000. So it's 21 years old. I got shit for it. I was on Art Bell, and I talked about $600 silver. It was a side little thing. And I said, you know, we're going to get to the point of $600 silver, but you're not going to want to live in that world. It wouldn't be all roses and happy. And then we sort of went off on other stuff. But from that point on, I've been getting shit about the $600 silver. But imagine what would $600 silver is going to do to the banks and that world, because you're right there. You can see it happening. Silver lease rates are up. Silver is dried up. It's drying up at a wholesale level. I've been talking to David Morgan. This is a man who has literally, he's got his hand on the pulse of the metals industry, and he can feel the beat of the metal waning down in China, waning down in India in the production facilities. So he knows exactly what's occurring at that level, or has that impression. I won't say exactly. I'm not going to speak for him, but he has really good information about what's going on at all aspects of the silver world. So imagine what is going to happen as silver escalates beyond the ability of the banks to control it, because it's been controlled for, according to Bix Weir, 150 or 170 years. And I don't dispute that, because really it started being controlled at the point of the opium wars with China, between Britain and China. And that was exactly over silver. We should really call it the Silver Wars, not Opium Wars. And what had happened was the Brits grew opium, imported it into China, got the population hooked, and demanded silver for the opium. Silver started fleeing China, flooding out of China, going to Britain, the Chinese emperor said, basically, WTF, dudes? And where's all our silver going? And then they had a number of wars over it at various different levels. And in fact, we're probably still fighting those wars. So, at this point, I can't give financial advice, but you can see that if our financial system is going into upheavals that are akin to things of the past, 1789 in France, the French Revolution was basically an upheaval over the introduction of industrialization and the corruption of the money at the time. Two combinations that killed the population and ended up going on to have that population kill a number of the elite. We're at that level of stuff right now. We've got the compounded space woo, we've got the compounded weather woo that's also hitting us, the ice age formation that will be very rapid perhaps, that we need to react to. We're going to have to shift capital. We're going to have to start reindustrializing under terrible conditions here in the United States. We will probably have a diaspora where our population has to relocate because, for instance, if it gets really serious, if the Great Lakes region becomes the center of a new area of glaciation and continuing cold, and we lose those areas for growing, it's also going to be extremely difficult for individuals to live there, especially as they age. You're going to need more supporting infrastructure. The infrastructure is going to come under a great deal more strain. We're going to have to decide where we're going to put our capital, just as the Federal Reserve has reached the point of maximum ability to stretch the value of the dollar. So you see, all of these things are all compounding on us all at once. And this is why I feel this particular sense of urgency to try and keep up on a weird schedule of every couple of days, get it out at least once a week to discuss these things that are going to be occurring over this period of time as they all start whomping us. And it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the civilization. It's not the end of humanity, although it potentially could be the end of humanity weather-wise, or if we really screw up and make a lot of mistakes, right? But that's really a low order of probability. We got a lot of smart people and a lot of people that are willing to work. So what we have to do is we have to stop doing a lot of the stupid things that we're doing, right? What good is a brand new Tesla car if all of the roads are frozen from Maine to Nevada, right? and all the windmills are all solid blocks of ice and all of that kind of stuff. We need to rethink where humanity is at this moment. And in order to do that, thank God we're in the, thank universe here, because we are in the age of Aquarius. We're in the age of knowledge. As we go forward here, people that have knowledge can stand up and say, no, you're wrong. That's only your opinion. It's formed by these assumptions. You've been misled about those assumptions. And you're wrong. And we can't be wrong because we'll die. And so under those circumstances, knowledge rises. And, and the bullshit just fades. And we're at that point right now. I don't know how long it'll take before Elon Musk gets Tesla cranking on magnetic motors, trying to create a distributed electrical system by low-cost, devices that work even at least 5 years. If you do it for 5 years, if these devices would work for 5 years, they're only going to cost about, let's just say that we double my effective thinking on costs, and we escalate the cost of the magnets 4 times. They would cost about $4,000, okay? I actually think realistically I could produce them for under $1,000 if I had a steady supply of neodymium magnets, which we have issues, right? And we also need plastics. We don't have plastic production here in the United States. We've got nylon facilities, and we can use nylon in these, but nonetheless. Okay, so if they lasted even 5 years, and even at a cost of $5,000, the replacement cost in 5 years is trivial based on the amount of stuff you can do with the electricity that's generated out of that thing over those 5 years. And this is just the motor part. The generator, the actual electrical generator that you attach these things to, might have an effective lifespan of 50 or 100 years cared for, not without a lot of dust and stuff on it, and you'd just have to connect a new motor to it every so often. The issue being that the magnets would lose their magnetism in this constant swirl of the torturing of the ether in these devices. And it would, I'm just saying that maybe they're going to be reduced 40% over the 5 years to where they can't really get the torque you need. Then disconnect it and get a new one. And we'll be building them better by then. So we're not trying to build perpetual energy machines. We're not trying to build free energy, because bear in mind, we got an energy cost to build the thing. And so it has to be amortized over the cost of over its lifespan. And so it's not free energy. It's just energy that we don't have to provide fuel for, because we're taking it off of the difference between our fading magnetosphere, which is where we come back into space woo, and the lower level of the Earth's magnetic field, and we take the difference between them with these little devices filled with these magnets. And it's kind of like a heat pump for electricity in that sense. Sorry about that. Anyway, there we go. So this is space woo. We're getting into this period where we're going to have this space alien stuff come out, where we're going to have the extra energies from space ramp up. We're going to decide that the climate actually is connected to space, and there ain't shit that humans can do about it, but we need to react to it, respond to it, but we can't stop it. We can't save the Earth. We can't save the climate. We can't return the climate to anything, because we are not in control of it. To believe that is a delusion. Those people that do believe that delusion, for whom science is settled, bullshit dudes, those people are probably not going to survive, and we can't waste a lot of time with them. So the idea now is to get focused and, don't, I mean, if you're going to shed friends over things, shed those friends that are dragging you down and not letting you move forward at this point. Not everybody's going to come through this. According to our data sets, the way back when, we're going to lose 1/7 of humanity, approximately 1 billion people. So, don't be one of them. Bye, guys. Live long and prosper. It's a fun time, really it is. I mean, we've always had challenges. You could always have been hit by a car, eaten by a lion, dying from, food poisoning, any of these kind of things. So we can be taken out just like that in the normal course of events. Look at these grand things, universe likes us so much that's presenting these grand challenges for us. And we get to have space woo and UFOs and shit. It's gonna be cool.